I think we are on the internet.
Is that us?
Technology is amazing.
Excellent.
good, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another work from home webinar with QSC. My name is Patrick Hine, and I'll be your moderator today. We have a pretty exciting webinar. We introduced Enterprise Manager, which is a remote monitoring and management solution for Q-SYS, back in December. And so we're here to answer any and all of your questions. Martin Barber, who is the Director of Meeting Room Solutions and Cloud Solutions. I butchered that. That's probably pretty bad. Anyways, he is kind of the founder of the feast. Anything that you need to know about Enterprise Manager, he is going to answer those questions. Going to give a very quick overview of the solution, going to show you how fast it installs, and then he's going to show you a little bit about what you can do with Enterprise Manager and the problems and business things that you're going to solve with Enterprise Manager. Just so you have an awareness, there is a Q&A section at the bottom. Please use it. If you walk away with not answering your questions, shame on you. That's on you, not on us, because we are dying to answer your questions. And then the other bit I might throw, just so we can manage the conversation, which again, this is a conversation. I might throw a poll up every once in a while, just so that we can gauge where you guys are. So for example, we're super curious about if you as a participant are a Q-SYS installer now, or you're kind of new to the platform and you're here to learn a little bit more. So if you see a poll like that, go ahead, fill it out, and then close it up, and that will help kind of engage the conversation. And then lastly, if you have one of these handy dandy VoIP microphones, we have not a huge group today, so I'm more than willing to open up your VoIP microphones if you have direct questions that you need follow-ups to. And if you're feeling brave, I might, turn your microphone on, and if you choose to engage it, then we can have a deeper conversation. But Martin, I'm looking at the poll right now, and we do have quite a few folks that are new to Q-SYS. I'm going to quickly end this poll, and I'm going to share those results so that you can see. But a decent portion of these folks are relatively new to Q-SYS.
That's great news. Okay.
Yeah.
So
with
based
that,
on that,
yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. And so based on that, what I think I might do is spend a couple of minutes talking about the Q-SYS platform before getting stuck into Enterprise Manager as a whole. So bear with me while I quickly adapt and take you through a couple of extra slides that we weren't planning on doing this morning, but I think are worthwhile given the context. So Q-SYS is a really deeply integrated audio-video control solution. It's effectively an infrastructure product that allows you to build solutions for anything that requires audio, video, and control. And when I say it's tightly integrated, I really mean that to the nth degree. And by that, I mean we actually share a single code set across the entire platform. Each of these audio, video, and control endpoints that make up the solution are developed by a single team working under a single group under a single leadership. And we actually share that same software code across those audio, video, and control endpoints. So it's very, very tightly integrated, designed to make your systems to go together extremely quickly, easily. And it's not a individual set of audio, video, control endpoints that we then retrospectively try and crowbar together and make work together. These are designed from the ground up to work together as a single, complete ecosystem. So we touched on audio, video, control, and then at the higher layer above that, we have the Q-SYS Reflect cloud infrastructure, which we'll talk about for the most of the presentation. And that really ties the whole thing together and provides this very cohesive single solution for our customers. I think there are two key points here that are new to Q-SYS. From an audio perspective, we've been building audio products and audio DSP signal processing and audio endpoints, networked amplifiers, networked I/O expanders, etc., for many years with Q-SYS, and most people are already familiar with that. We recently introduced control and video, and so I want to focus on those just for a moment. The control piece of Q-SYS is really a software layer inside the Q-SYS core processor. You enable it through software licensing if you want to use control capabilities in your project. And what that means is you can, rather than having to bring in an audio DSP from us and a control processor from somebody else and try to make them work together, simply by enabling that software license on the Q-SYS core, you have now a single device that provides you your real-time audio signal processing and your control processing all in one hardware box, with all of that control integration between those environments already done for you. So it's extremely quick to build systems using the control layer that's natively built into that audio DSP platform. And in fact, the marketing team, Nate and Patrick, worked on some very interesting videos and demonstrations that illustrated how to bring up an entire meeting room of various different AV type devices in less than an hour. And if you haven't seen that, it's the burrito video, and it's very easy to find.
I'll throw it in the chat.
You'll throw it in the chat, perfect. Thanks, Patrick. In addition to that, we also added video. And so we have native IP-based video cameras for web conferencing applications. Again, extremely easy to integrate Q-SYS with any software codec, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, etc. Using our own cameras, you can add cameras to your system in a matter of minutes and have them up and running, and full control in just a few moments. And also, more recently, we added IP-based video distribution for HDMI-based sources and endpoints. So again, very, very high quality 4K 6444 video distribution over a standard gigabit IP network, again, built on the same technology that makes up the entire Q-SYS ecosystem. So I think with those two pillars, in addition to the existing audio pillar that's been there for many years, you start to see that this is a very rounded, full AVC solution. And again, as I said, at the top layer, Enterprise Manager or Q-SYS Reflect, tying this all together. So with that, I'm going to move into the primary topic of today's webinar, which is Q-SYS Reflect Enterprise Manager. And before we get stuck into it, I want to just focus on this slide for a moment. There are really two separate elements to the name here. Q-SYS Reflect is actually a web foundational technology platform that QSC has built. And it's a delivery mechanism that allows us to provide software services to our customers. Enterprise Manager is a remote management and monitoring service that runs on the Q-SYS Reflect technology platform. So today's topic really is Enterprise Manager, and that will what we'll be focusing on today. So how does it work? So from a hierarchical perspective, every end user sets up an organization inside our cloud infrastructure. Our organization, again, represents your end user, and then that organization includes things like your subscription licenses, your API tokens, which we'll talk about in a moment, billing contacts, administration contacts, basically the management of that organization within the cloud infrastructure. Within that organization, you can then create one or more sites. And a site is really a logical grouping tool. It allows you to group AV systems however you want. A site can represent a building. It can represent a floor within a building. A site can represent a campus, a city, a country, even a continent. It's really just a grouping tool that you can use to group your systems however suits your needs. Within the site, we then connect our Q-SYS-based AV systems. And I think this is where we start to get into some of the key differentiators between Enterprise Manager and some of the other solutions that are available on the market today. So for us, a system represents a Q-SYS core or a pair of redundant Q-SYS cores running a design file and attached to their associated peripheral devices. And those peripheral devices can be both native Q-SYS devices, networked amplifiers, touchscreens, video cameras, etc., or any third-party AV peripheral that you want to monitor with this solution. And the way you monitor those third-party devices is by leveraging the control platform that's part of Q-SYS. So we connect all of those peripheral devices, again, third-party or Q-SYS, up to the Q-SYS core. The Q-SYS core actually becomes a data aggregator. It's grabbing real-time data from all of the devices it's attached to, whilst it's also doing its audio signal processing duties. Grabs them all together and then provides a single data stream up to the Q-SYS Reflect cloud infrastructure. And that's really important because it means that we have only one device per system that needs to connect to the cloud. So I could be looking at, for example, a simple meeting room, perhaps with 3 or 4 AV peripherals in that meeting room. And again, just one connection up to the cloud from the core. I could also be looking at an airport or a stadium where I may have many hundreds of audio endpoints, networked amplifiers, paging stations, etc., all connected to a single core. And again, a system of that scale, only a single connection up to the cloud coming from the core. So it enables Q-SYS to provide a huge amount of robustness and security measures around how this system is built, because those peripherals never see the internet, they never see the cloud. It's only the core. And so we provide encrypted communications from the core to the cloud using standard IT principles and protocols, port 443 for those of you who are interested. So it's very, very easy to deploy. And what we've seen in the customers who are deploying this already, only perhaps 2% of our users need to do anything in terms of firewall configuration. The vast majority of our users are just up and running by providing your core with a DNS and a gateway address, and you're up and running. And I'll show you that in a few moments. So again, just to sort of summarize this slide, hierarchical structure, top down to the bottom, organization, sites, systems, peripherals, single connection from the Q-SYS core up to the cloud provides everything, including all the data from the Q-SYS or third-party peripheral devices. So that all connects up to the cloud, and we have our own Enterprise Manager web UI that you can use to view that, interact with it, and manage it. And I'll show you that in a few moments. And this is really a tool set that's been designed for AV professionals. It's really focused around the capabilities of the Q-SYS platform, but again, it enables you to see and monitor those third-party AV devices also as part of your deployment. Now, we know across the spectrum of users that we work with, there's both customers who need this very AV specialized tool set, but there are also customers who already have software solutions in the IT domain that they're using to monitor other IT assets already. And quite often they want to have that single software application, sometimes referred to as a single pane of glass, that allows them to see every asset on the network. That includes IT assets and AV assets. So in that case, we provide a cloud-to-cloud RESTful API that allows any third-party software application to extract the data from the Q-SYS Reflect Cloud, bring that into a software application of your choosing, and manipulate it any way you want. Splunk and SolarWinds are 2 good examples of that, but it's not limited to that. It's an open API that anybody can use to ingest that software into any software application they want. And that allows you to, again, combine the data from the Q-SYS systems and integrate that tightly with your IT assets or anything else you're monitoring, and give you that single view about the performance of your entire network infrastructure. So getting into the nitty-gritty of the product, Enterprise Manager is a software as a service solution. And as a result of that, is a subscription service. So the price that the end user pays is based upon the number of systems and the number of peripherals that you're monitoring with it. And the price points are derived by the tier that you choose. And just like many other software services, there are multiple tiers to choose from. So we actually have a basic tier, which is a free tier for everybody who wants it. It's a single place that you can connect all your cores to and get visibility to those cores remotely. And so I really encourage anybody who is considering cloud connectivity or cloud services to at least start off with the basic tier, because this starts to build up your understanding of how cloud services can assist you with these cloud connected Q-SYS cores. When we move into the standard tier, this is a paid tier, but what we provide for that is a really painless remote management and monitoring solution for complete AV systems, not just Q-SYS devices. And we'll dig into some of the details of that in just a few moments. So with respect to going back to the payment side for a moment, subscription service, again, we've seen how the price is constructed, monthly or yearly payment terms, and it is a 1-year contract with an auto-renewing contract. So from a tiers perspective, free basic tier, paid standard tier, this is what's available today. You can go on, sign up for a solution right now, and I'll show you some of the details a little while later on. We also, coming down the pipe in an upcoming feature or an upcoming software release, have an additional tier, the professional tier. And this is going to round out the 3 tiers that will make up Enterprise Manager. And what this adds is the ability to provide remote operations support. And just to put a finer point on that, that gives you the ability to pull up a user control interface or a UCI and interact with that UCI via web browser remotely from anywhere in the world. And so examples of where this might be useful is if you're centralizing your operations support team, but you have deployments of AV systems across the country, this allows you to have those centralized AV support team members assisting customers in remote locations with, for example, getting the meeting started efficiently, making sure the right content is going to the right screens, validating that the events that are in progress are proceeding as expected, and provide those remote assistance as necessary. We're also adding with the professional tier the ability to remotely update your Q-SYS cores. And that includes not only pulling the design file and pushing new design files to the cores, it also includes pushing firmware. And all of that is done via the cloud infrastructure. So no requirement for static IP addresses, VPN connections, or any of that stuff. It's all managed through this cloud infrastructure. So again, depending upon the goal of your business and frankly, what it is you're trying to get out of the solution, standard is an excellent remote management and monitoring solution. And then professional tier adds those deeper operation support or Q-SYS core updates capabilities a little bit later in this year. So moving on from there, we start to dig into some of these tiers in a bit more detail. So again, just to reiterate, the basic tier is free for everybody who has a Q-SYS core for the life of that system. It provides you with this single location whereby you can connect all of your Q-SYS cores. Effectively, it allows you to very easily get peace of mind for all of those systems that you're not in physical contact with on a daily basis. So if you've got systems deployed, again, across multiple cities or even counties, this allows you to have a single place, all of those cores connected up in real time, and you can visit that single website, see how they're all behaving. Are they up and running? Are they running the design file that you put onto them? In other words, validating that somebody else is not interfering with those cores. Are they running the firmware that you left them with? Again, validation that somebody else has not made changes to those cores. And it allows you to remotely check and even change network settings on those cores. In addition to that, we also have the ability to activate software feature licenses on those cores. So again, your centralized support team can remotely activate Q-SYS control on cores that maybe didn't have it through this software feature license. Or maybe they're using software-based Dante and they need to add some more channels. Again, you can do that through licensing remotely on any core that you've got access to via the cloud. And frankly, you can do them all in just a few seconds. It's extremely efficient and very well put together. Moving on from the basic tier into the standard tier, this is when we really get into the management and monitoring piece. And a standard tier allows me to monitor thousands or tens of thousands of devices across the globe. Again, this is now giving me visibility not just to the core itself, but all of the attached peripherals that make up those systems. So that allows you to get visibility to how all of your AV systems are behaving in real time and make sure that your support teams have got the information that they need to adequately support your customers on a real-time basis. So at the beginning of every day, you know exactly what happened over the previous 24 hours. If you need to divert emergency support resources to go and look after a system that went down overnight and is still down, all of those details are contained within the standard tier feature set. Real-time status and event logs from all your AV devices. Again, not just Q-SYS devices. So a lot of really valuable preventative maintenance, proactive maintenance capabilities built into this tier. It also allows you to centralize those management resources. When you have very dynamic solutions or systems across the globe, where you need to be able to make updates in real time across broad numbers of systems at the same time, Enterprise Manager gives you the ability to get to those systems and, for example, update security profiles. Security is a constantly moving goalpost, frankly, changing on a daily, weekly basis. And so with remote access to Enterprise Manager and the standard tier, it enables you to keep your cores set up with the most appropriate security profiles for your IT infrastructure. We taught audio playlists and visual signage for meeting rooms. These can all be updated, again, using the standard tier remotely. And also, finally, on this piece, it's where we introduce this RESTful API and allows you to integrate with third-party software applications to get access to those data sets and integrate them with other software solutions. And then to put a finer point on the professional tier, again, this allows us to pull up any of those UCIs that are part of our Q-SYS systems. And for those customers who are new to use Q-SYS, the UCI is effectively the customized user interface that runs on any of the touch panel devices that are in these rooms or made available via wireless devices for, again, support personnel. All of those are called UCIs. They're hosted on the Q-SYS cores, and the professional tier allows you to pull those up remotely via web browser and interact with them and provide that operational support to customers, irrespective of where they are. And when it comes to updating the design, again, really importantly, it allows me to see with Q-SYS Designer a real-time system, troubleshoot it, and then push changes as necessary. They might be updates to system. They might be, your customer has requested a change to the touch panel layout. Again, you can pull that up, make those changes and push it without needing to have your AV support programmers on site, and also push firmware to those systems. Particularly useful when you need to schedule firmware updates or you need to perform firmware updates out of normal business hours. This means that you can do this at your leisure from home or from the office without having to schedule AV support personnel to be on site at the time of that firmware upgrade. So that rounds out the three tiers. And what I wanted to do now briefly before we get into the product itself, as part of QSC's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are making Enterprise Manager available for free to all end user customers through to the end of January 2021. We know that getting people to site right now is challenging. And so we want to do everything we can to make life as easy as it possibly can be for our AV support users. And so end users can come onto the website right now and sign up for a free subscription. And it'll give them access to all the feature sets available at that time through to the end of January. So you'll get access to the standard tier features now, and you'll get access to the professional tier features as soon as they're available through until the end of January 2021 for free. So go to the QSC website and take a look at that and get signed up.
And Martin, I threw that link in the chat just if you want to grab that. But wait till the end of the presentation, but you copy that down. It's a good link to have.
Perfect. So Patrick, I'm going to jump in and do a brief demo now. Before I get stuck into that, are there any questions that we want to take a look at?
There were a couple, one of which was about whether or not you can get this into an on-prem, but I didn't know if you wanted to handle that one prior to your demo or afterwards.
Let's do it now.
Yeah, let's do it.
We actually have a slide that we can use to talk about that. And just to put a fine point on the answer itself, the answer is no. There is no on-prem solution. This solution, Enterprise Manager, is based solely on public cloud infrastructure. And we made those decisions for a few reasons. First of all, from an end user's perspective, it's much easier to cost out a cloud infrastructure solution. There is no requirement for you to set up servers, set up databases, etc. on your local IT infrastructure. So there's no upfront costs. and a very predictable monthly or yearly cost. From a scalability perspective, this plays into the same thing. You don't need to manage or maintain an on-prem server to manage this system. The system scales precisely with you. You simply connect your systems, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. And it scales for any customer size. The agility one is really important to me, actually. As someone who's involved in the product development and product management side of this, I want to make sure that my customers have access to the best experience as quickly as possible. And this allows, and cloud infrastructure allows us to push updates, and both feature updates and bug fixes and security patches immediately that every customer can get access to. So we're not constrained by the normal firmware release cadence. So we spot an issue, we can address it and make sure that every customer gets access to it immediately, which is very, very important. And then finally, simplicity. And we talked a little bit about this on the cost side. There is no need to maintain, set up, manage servers. You just get your cores hooked up to the cloud and you're done. So that's a long way of saying we believe that the best solution for the majority of our customers is through cloud-hosted solutions. We recognize that may not always be possible, but we think that this answers the majority of the problems for the majority of the customers. And we're also seeing a trend of customers increasingly becoming comfortable with leveraging cloud-based solutions.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. A couple other questions, actually, before you get to the demo. You chatted a little bit about the free trial. We had some friends in Canada that were dismayed that they couldn't get access to it. Do you have some good news for them?
Be dismayed no more. We are within days, I believe, if not days, a small number of weeks of rolling Enterprise Manager out to some additional regions. So first of all, Enterprise Manager is available today to end users based in the US, UK, Germany, Ireland, and Australia. Those were our first go live territories. And we're rolling this out to an additional 5 or 6 territories in the next few days, weeks. So it's coming your way very soon, and Patrick will be at the helm of pushing out the marketing collateral as soon as that's ready to switch on.
Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to, before you go on, just so for your edification, Martin, and for the rest of the group, most of today's group has some kind of knowledge of remote monitoring management solutions on other platforms. So it's just to give a little bit of context on before you hit your demo and things to chat about. Just a little bit of food for thought.
Love it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to switch now to a demo. So you should all now be able to see my web browser. Patrick, if you would do me a favor and confirm that I haven't shared just an app. I've actually shared
we are looking at your web browser. Thank you.
So when you log into Enterprise Manager, this is the screen you're presented with. You log in with your QSC account. I'm sure that this is going to generate a question about single sign-on, so let me address that now. There is no single sign-on support with Enterprise Manager yet, but it is something that we're working on and we will bring to the market very soon. So we sign in with our QSC account, which gets me access to Enterprise Manager. And what we're looking at now is effectively our homepage, which gives me as a user visibility to all of the sites that I have access to. You'll remember from the organizational architecture illustration, my first slide, I have access as a user to 3 separate organizations. My own organization, a QSC trade show organization, and a QSC Boulder office organization. In this case, each of those organizations has just one site that I have access to. That's what's represented in these 3 cards. And this gives me an immediate view of the performance of those systems connected to those sites. As you would expect, the QSC trade show is fully offline right now. All 7 of those QSC systems that we normally have hooked up on the QSC booths, they're currently showing offline because they're packed away in storage right now. On the production site, which is where I want to focus, I have got 1 system connected, and it is showing at least it's in a fault state. And to learn more about that, I can dive into that site, and I now get a bit more information. The system is running, but it's got 1 device in a fault state and 1 device in a warning state. Fault is the highest priority of these various states that can be there, which is why, as a whole, that system is presenting as a fault. So before I get into the system itself, I wanted to illustrate the ease with which we can connect Q-SYS systems up to this Enterprise Manager solution. So right now I'm looking at just one system as part of my site. And what I would like to do is, oh, I just realized something. I'm logged in as the wrong user type, which means I can't add a user. Please hold, caller, while I log into a different infrastructure.
No problem. I'll vamp a
You know
little bit
what?
because I have a few. Go ahead, Martin.
You know what? Let's skip the registration process for the moment. We'll carry on with the demo. And if I can get things aligned elsewhere, I'll come back and I'll show you the registration demo. But for
Perfect.
the moment, take my word for it. It's about a 30-second process. Very, very simple to do. So we'll come back to that. So looking at the solution, again, as I illustrated, this particular system is set up. It's got one fault, one warning. And to learn more about that, I click into the system. And now I'm looking in detail at that Q-SYS system and all the peripheral devices that are attached to it. So first of all, it gives me the system name. It also gives me the name of the design file running on the core. And these can be different. And by default, system name will just copy the design file name and will update every time you update the design file. What I've done in this case is given the system a friendly name. And that name is now persistent, irrespective of which design file is loaded onto the core. So it's the system name that really is most useful to me within the Enterprise Manager environment, because it enables me to label rooms or systems with something that's going to be persistent. I can also see when that core was last updated, the name of the core that's running that system, the core model, and the firmware version that it's running right now. Moving down into the inventory table, these are all of the devices that make up our system. And as you can see, it gives me the real-time status of those devices. Also, of course, their names, the type of devices they are. And you'll see here in the manufacturer list that this particular system includes a mix of native Q-SYS devices or QSC devices, and also third-party devices. And I'll show you in a few moments how we get those third-party devices into Enterprise Manager. Moving on from the status, we also have the event log. This gives me timestamped events for everything that happened across this particular system. So it's very, very useful for going back and tracing, looking for issues, finding out what happened either side of an issue, which can give you a bit of clarity about why something happened. It's also a useful place to figure out what's going on with specific devices. And so I can see this particular printer, for argument's sake, went through various states of online, offline, and it helps me see when those happened, etc. And the same is true of other third-party devices. So I can see, for example, that the Sennheiser City microphone was in use during this particular hour of the day. So again, a lot of useful information. A lot of it natively comes from the product itself. And if you're familiar with Q-SYS, that will make a lot of sense. We build a lot of this capability into the platforms. You don't have to think about it. But what you're also seeing here is an example of where I have manually created something that I want to go into the event log and the ability to see and sort by that. We don't need to go through the rest of the core management in too much detail. We have, the ability to remotely set daytime, set up NTP servers, network settings. I do want to touch on security for a moment because it's a common thread, and customers get asking about this when we start talking about cloud solutions. So a little bit about how Q-SYS works. The Q-SYS cores have some number of network interface ports. The smallest cores today have 2 network interface ports. The largest have 4. And so this table allows you to see all of the network services that are enabled on each of those network ports. These are not switched ports. They're also not routed network ports or routed network ports. These are separate network interfaces into the core, much like you would have on a PC that has multiple separate network interface ports, wireless and wired. So this enables me to really be very prescriptive about the way the core is configured from a network security perspective to suit the needs of my IT environment. And so for example, if I go to the management tab, it's not going to let me edit this because I have the wrong permissions. But as an administrator, I would be able to edit these permissions and switch off all of the unnecessary network services across LAN B, for example. A common deployment option with Q-SYS is to have the LAN A network hooked up to an in-room AV network where it's doing all the real-time media streaming, video distribution, audio streaming, PTP clock, device discovery, all of these things that you see here that Q-SYS is capable of doing. And so within the AV network, those things are required, or many of them are required. But on the LAN B port, which I want to hook up to my corporate infrastructure, none of that stuff is required. The only thing that's really required for remote management and monitoring is port 443, which is this Q-SYS Designer Secure. So I can, on LAN B, disable every single service, with the exception of Q-SYS Designer Communication Secure, which is encrypted port 443 connectivity, and leave that on LAN B, which means the only thing active on LAN B and the corporate infrastructure is that certificate authenticated encrypted communications between the Q-SYS core and the cloud infrastructure. Now, you might also use LAN B to talk to the company IPPBX for softphone services. So again, you can leave that service active on LAN B. But the important piece here is that this tool set allows you to be very, very detailed about what is and what is not running on each of those network ports. Users allows us to set up access control. I haven't done it on this core. I would normally recommend that you do set up access control. Using that, you can start to see who is activated, who is logging into your cores, who is making changes to those cores, and what those changes are. Licensing, as described earlier on, allows me to remotely activate software licenses on those cores. And once this page loads up, what you'll see is that the core is telling me, yes, it has a valid connection to the QSC licensing server. So using this, I can remotely activate software licenses by pasting a string, hitting activate, and I'm done. It's just a few seconds to activate those software licenses. I can manage audio files and playlists on the solution, remotely reboot it, download log files, etc. And then we get into some of the Q-SYS system-specific pieces, user control interfaces, soft phones, etc. And we can go through that in more detail if there are any questions around it, but for the time being, just know that this is a very deep Q-SYS feature-rich management tool. So this is looking at a single Q-SYS system. And if we start going back up through the layers, we start to get more information. So for example, at the sites layer, here is where I can manage access control to these systems. And so given the level of access that I have right now, I'm unable to add additional members, but I could, as an administrator, invite additional members to this site. And as a user, you can have access to different sites with different levels of access control to those sites. So a common use of this would be, a single customer who has got nationwide sites. They could set up access to the East Coast systems for one system integrator and the West Coast systems and sites for a different system integrator. At the organization head level, they have visibility to all of those things, but they've been able to be very prescriptive about which system integrators have access to which systems. And then going back up the higher level to the organization and sites level, again, this is the higher level visibility to all of my sites and all of my systems. We now get into some of the more unique features that are only accessible inside Enterprise Manager. One of them is the audit log. The audit log gives me visibility to all of the systems that I have access to and what changes have been made to those systems and who made them. So this includes changes that have been made via the cloud infrastructure, via Q-SYS Reflect or Enterprise Manager, and also changes that were made locally on the cores themselves. Now, in these particular cases, the local user, those changes were made on a core where access control was not enabled. So as a result, the user is effectively anonymous. But if that core had access control enabled, we would see here the name of the user that made changes locally on the core in addition to any changes that were made remotely via the cloud. We also have an alerts and notification system. So this gives me a single view of all of the alerts or all of the errors that have happened across all of the systems. So when I talk about the remote management and monitoring tool set and the ability for you to be able to direct your support teams to focus on the most pertinent issues for the day, this really is the single view that gives me that information. It only captures here warnings or alerts. So it's a very tailored look at all of your systems. So it grabs all of those warnings and errors into this single table. It tells you these are the things that happened that you need to be aware of. But it also tells me the current status of the device that caused those alerts. So this is extremely useful. It says, hey, that printer was in fault, and this is the time it happened. And in fact, that same printer has caused 4 alerts over the period of time that I'm looking at. But right now, it's okay, which means I can divert my support resources elsewhere. And I'm going to focus them here because this device that caused an alert is still in a fault state. So that's where I'm going to focus my support team's efforts. So the alerts table is extremely useful. And we also have the ability of setting up notification emails that are generated by those alerts. So I can enable those notifications. I determine how often I want to receive a notification email, and those emails will include any changes to the system or any alerts generated by those systems since the last time I received an alert notification. And then finally, down here at the organizations layer, this is where I get access to, I start to see how many licenses I've purchased and how many licenses are currently in use. I can manage who has access to these systems. I can generate invitations, and I can set up those secure API tokens for third-party software applications to grab data and ingest it into a third-party software. So that's, I think, as much as we're going to get into on this walkthrough. So Patrick, I'm going to turn back to you for a moment. You know what? Before we do that, I did promise that I would at least show how we had third-party devices reporting into the solution. So give me one moment to do that, and then I think we will hand back for any more Q&A.
Great. Yeah, let's do that. We've got some questions lined up, but I think I would love to see. I'm going to set the stopwatch to see how fast we can do this.
Okay, so I'm not going to connect it up. What I'm doing is I'm talking about third-party devices and how they show up in the inventory.
I'm sorry.
No problem. So here in the inventory, you see that we have some devices called Canon, Mersive, Sennheiser in the inventory. I want to show you how we made that happen. So I'm going to go into Q-SYS Designer for a moment. And it's Q-SYS Designer that really manages the connections between your core and third-party devices. And there's a couple of tools you have access to enable you to do that. At the most basic level, we have this relatively new control component called monitoring proxy. And monitoring proxy is very straightforward. It has a status control pin that you send to the proxy what status you want to be shown for that device. And in this particular case, I'm using a generic ping component that's pinging a device, and provided I'm getting good solid responses back from that device, my status is going to be okay. If I change that IP address to something that I know is not going to work, immediately changes the monitoring proxy, and that data is now being piped up to Enterprise Manager, and you'll see that on the cloud side. In fact, if I go to printer, it's now showing in a fault state. So that happens in real time. And this, as I said, is a very simple example of how that works. We also have an SNMP query component that can do the same job for some more sophisticated devices that leverage SNMP instead. Getting down here, we have a little bit of an extension on what I've just shown you. So we're still deriving the status for the monitoring proxy component, but what we're also doing is generating event log messages that I want to be printed to the event log at various events. So I still get my OK or fault status from this component here, But in addition to that, I'm using the block controller to do some simple logic processing and print different messages to the event log. So the signal presence detector is just saying, is the microphone receiving audio? If I spoof it by increasing this threshold, it'll say, no, it's not receiving audio anymore. And so what I can do then is take that control logic change into my block controller, and using some block control scripts, I can take that control command and turn it into strings that go into the event log. So in this particular case, if the microphone was used for more than 600 seconds in a 3600 second sample period, then I'm going to print a message to the event log that says the microphone was used this hour. And it's really that straightforward. Now, this programming environment is a native part of Q-SYS Control. It's intended for customers who are learning to move towards code programming, but it does so in a method that avoids any syntax errors. You can't make syntax errors because you're using these interconnecting blocks. So it allows you to practice and learn programming methodologies without getting wrapped around the axle of, should I have a comma or a semicolon or a full stop in this particular part of my code? So it's a very, very useful tool for learning code scripting. We also, of course, have got a very deep Lua-based programming interface for customers who are comfortable writing code from the ground up. So the control part of the platform is very rich, and it's natively built in. So Patrick, I think in addition to, just before I hand back to you, the monitoring proxy, I think, illustrates methods of using these generic ping components, any scripting component to generate those third-party devices. I also have the ability to use plugins. And in the Asset Manager, which is QSC's cloud repository for plugins, we have these plugins here which show the QR emblem, which talks about they are Q-SYS Reflect enabled. What that means is if I drag those into my workspace, and I'm going to show you that now, like going offline and taking one of those devices, I can drag this device into my workspace. And in its first instance, it's just a normal control plugin. By setting up the network connections, I can now remotely control that device. But if I'm really interested in monitoring it through Enterprise Manager, I go to the properties and say, is managed yes, at which point that plugin is now part of my system inventory. And as a result of it being in this system inventory here, it will also appear in my cloud infrastructure the next time that design file is pushed to the cloud, or to the core, excuse me.
And that piece is important too, because once you're outside of your free trial and you want to do a paid subscription, the pricing structure is per system and per peripheral. So if there are peripherals that you don't want to monitor, like this at Lona Juno, you merely check is not managed, and obviously that will not count against how many peripherals that you're currently being charged for.
Right. So I think that's it, Patrick. What have we got going on in the Q&A?
So we've got a couple questions. So there's a viewer that's interested in using this worldwide. He's based in the US, but potentially might want to understand if he can use this to monitor multiple systems that are outside those approved countries, and what the consequences of that is.
It's a great question. And just to put a bit of clarity around the regional piece of this, the regions that we're live in have been chosen so that we can ensure that we are in compliance with the local data privacy requirements for those regions and countries. So GDPR in the case of Germany and the UK and Ireland, and other regional data privacy requirements in Australia and the US. And the reason we're being very systematic in our global rollout is because we want to make sure that we're in compliance with all of those regions as we start to bring on additional countries, etc. If you're based in the US and you want to connect cores that are not in the US, we're not policing that in any shape or form. And that is up to you. But it is also then up to you to verify that you're not infringing upon any data privacy requirements for those remote cores connecting into a US-based organization. So long story short, we're not policing it, but it is up to the user to verify that they are in compliance with any data privacy requirements for those remote Q-SYS cores.
Perfect. Next question was kind of in reference to the extended trial to January. It sounds like one of our users who might have been an integrator saw that link and identified himself as an integrator, and rather than being directed to the extended trial, which is, like you said, till January of 2021, he was redirected to the NFR license. So maybe if we could put a finer point on the difference between the extended trial for the end user and the NFR license for those other folks.
That's a great point. Actually, I'm glad that came up. So again, we were very clear around this one, is that the free access is for end user consumers of the product. But we also recognize that our system integration partners want and need access to this. And so that's when we have implemented the NFR license. NFR stands for not for resale. And this is a free license that any system integrator or consultant or other QSC partner can get access to. It gives you the same capabilities as the end user license. It gives you free access to the highest feature tier available at the time. So today that's standard tier. It will be professional tier a little bit later in the year. But it's designed to best suit your business needs. So if you're a system integrator or a consultant or a QSC partner of any other description, you will be taken through that NFR subscription route, and you will end up with the appropriate system subscription. Does that answer the question, Patrick, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. A follow-up to that, there was a worry that I think, because again, they were confused about the difference between NFR and the end user one. And so they were worried that at the conclusion of 2021, they would have to reload the systems. And then there was the other nuance to his question too, was that he didn't understand why the NFR license wasn't going to be able to be converted to a paid subscription. And the reason being, the NFR license, the nature and the intent of that is for evaluation and to show customers. So the idea is you shouldn't need to convert that, and we don't want integrators to convert that to a paid subscription, because the intent of that license is for evaluation and for showing customers.
And in fact, should be free for our partners. So there is no need to move that to a paid subscription. And if there's any more detail on that needed, then please reach out to the QSC sales management team, and they will help you with a lot of information around the various subscription types, and what their true intent is and how to maximize them in your organization.
Perfect. I think we got time for one more question, and I see there was a quick question on, and I think this is an astute observer of Core Manager. So they saw a lot of the functionality that was in Enterprise Manager, and they saw some similarities in Core Manager, and kind of questioned, can I do kind of the same kind of thing with Core Manager? And maybe you can describe the nuance between that.
Yeah, I can. It's a great question. That's actually why we have something prepared for it. Your viewer is absolutely right. There are intentional similarities between Q-SYS Core Manager, which runs natively on the core itself, and Enterprise Manager, which runs in the cloud. They also share a very similar code set. And the intent was that the user experience would be very familiar. We want customers who are already using Q-SYS and familiar with Core Manager to have a very familiar experience once they migrate to Enterprise Manager. But let's talk about the real specific differences between what those two tools are targeted at. Core Manager is intended for single system configuration where you have a local connection to that core. It's intended as a tool set that you use when you're on site commissioning your cores, and that's all. It is certainly possible to remotely get access to Core Manager. In fact, I did it today as part of this demonstration very, very briefly. But that requires a VPN connection, which it also requires static IP addressing to simplify the process, and a number of other workarounds to get that connectivity. And as a result of the fact, whilst it is technically possible, we don't recommend it because it adds complexity and it definitely gets in the way of scalability of deploying this and using it on large-scale deployments. So think of Core Manager as your tool set for locally configuring single cores. Enterprise Manager, on the other hand, is optimized for multiple system monitoring and support through this single web infrastructure. It massively simplifies the remote connectivity piece. You don't have to think about VPNs or static IP addresses or any of those other bits and pieces. It's all done for you. As a result of that, it's extremely scalable, very, very easy to use. Plus, it adds all of those other features on top of it, which don't exist in Core Manager, such as the alert notification piece and the automatic aggregation of status, real-time status from all those devices to tell you how your systems are performing, how your sites are performing, how your organization is performing. All that happens as part of the solution. The ability to track who's making changes to your system, either locally or remotely, is inherently part of Enterprise Manager, not available in Core Manager. And this Enterprise Manager ability to set up access control for different team members working on different set of systems, again, inherently part of Enterprise Manager, not Core Manager. And then finally, the ability to pull that data out into a third-party software application that comes from the cloud-to-cloud API in Enterprise Manager only. And this is a snapshot of the differences today. And what you should know is that from an ongoing software development perspective, the vast majority of the new stuff that you see will be going into Enterprise Manager.
Perfect. We are at the top of the hour. I'm going to throw a couple of quick links in the chat. If you want a little bit more information on learning how to use Enterprise Manager, particularly on the setup and some of the initial things that you need to do to get your system connected to Enterprise Manager, we would highly recommend doing the online training. So that's the first link in there. And then there's lots of questions about whether or not we can get these webinars on demand. We just today actually launched the on-demand page for all of our webinars. Actually, this particular recording will replace the one that's on there right now, but if you want to see the existing one or any of the other webinars that we've offered over the past 10 to 11 weeks, those are available as well. And I think with that, we are basically done. Actually, there's just a couple of people in the Q&A saying that they like the webinar, so I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that too. Thanks, guys.
Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.